All right, Eli, so I'm just looking at this other question you sent me about the area. So in the question, it was 8.4 workbook, question number 8. Sorry, just let me pull it up here. And so you were given like a little diagram of kind of something like this. I don't have the actual printed workbook, but it was kind of like this. And so basically, I feel like you had most of the calculations right, but it was kind of hard for me to tell exactly which numbers you were doing what with. So essentially what you would want to do is calculate the area of the two different shapes first. This one is a little bit tricky, the one in the workbook, because the triangle specifically is kind of like set off at an angle. So it's a little bit harder to be sure of exactly what the base and the height are. The circle is pretty straightforward. It has if you measure the full distance across the circle, it's 4 squares. So that means the radius is 2, which I believe is what you had. So you want to do pi times by 2 squared, which is 4. And one thing I did notice is I think you put in 3.14. When you're doing calculations, you want to be as precise as possible. So I recommend that you use the pi button on your calculator, not 3.14, because otherwise you won't get as close to the correct answer. So we want to do pi times by 4, which is 12.56. And then a continuing decimal, so we'll just kind of leave that for now. The area of the triangle was a little bit trickier, like I said, because it was offset. So let me see, I'm not sure what you had. I think you had a half times 4 times 4. Now for me, I felt like for sure the height was not much more than 3. Let me see if I can actually pull this over here. I'm not sure if you'll be able to see that. I think you'll be able to see that in the screen. It's hard to get it to scroll properly. So basically what I would have done here is I would have said, like, to count across the bottom, I would have said it's 1, 2, 3, 4 squares. But with the height, I would have said this bottom corner starts here and it goes 1, 2, 3 squares up, so I would have said 4 by 3. However, if you measure the height to the base like straight down, because this is not a 90-degree angle, it'd be 3 and a little bit, so like 3.2 was one of the calculations that I did. But either way, it's going to be somewhere in there, so I did 1/2 times by, the base was 4, and then I did the height. I tried it with 3 or 3.2, I felt like was a little bit more close to what it might be. So 3.2 times by 4 times by 0.5 gives you 6.4. So now we know that the total area of these two shapes together is going to be this 12.656 plus the 6.4. So again, always keep as many decimals as you can so that your answer stays quite precise. So the total area of those shapes together is 18.966, a continuing decimal. Now, as we know, when we're calculating area, we need to multiply it by this scale factor squared. And so our scale factor was 3.5. So basically, we're going to do this area times by 3.5 squared, which is 12.25. So that gives me 232.3. Now, you'll probably know that in the answer it said, let's see, 236.6 units. I kind of played around a little bit with, like, what if they thought that the length here was like 3.5, which gave me a little bit too long, and then 3 was too short. So I think probably generally your calculations were on the right track. It was just that with this one, it's a little bit trickier to figure out the exact lengths, because when I did this exact same type of calculation for this one that's in the textbook, oops, sorry, I gotta move that so that you can see it. So, oops, Sorry, I don't know what's going on here now. There we go. Okay, so when I did this exact same set of calculations for this one in the textbook, I got the exact answer that it says in the textbook. So the way that we're doing the calculations is clearly correct. It's just that figuring out exactly what the units were for that grid was a little bit trickier. So as long as you had your calculations being kind of like that, and let me just put in here, so this was your calculations. So I think you had your height maybe was a little bit too high, which is probably why you got a little bit too high of a number here. And then you could have also had issues because you did the 3.14 instead of using the full pi number. And I think that would be everything. 3.5 squared times by 13. Yeah, and then you found the areas separately and added them together afterwards, whereas I just kind of did that. And then multiplied by it by the scale factor. But essentially, I think your calculations are generally correct. I think it was just an issue with finding the number of squares on the grid that was being occupied. So I hope that helps, and let me know if you need any further clarification.